Hey everybody, welcome to Press A Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Zephyr Zero, and joining me today we have Wyldehigh 77. Nice intro.
There you go.
And we also have Ray, the Chronicler.
How's it going in audio land?
And additionally, Anthony is joining us today. How you doing, Anthony?
Doing good. I'm so sorry that you had me on this podcast.
Yeah,
Don't apologize. Voice talent's always great.
you got a video game screen name that we should be calling you?
Anthem 816.
Anthem
816. Alrighty. Today we are venturing away from the video games for a little bit. I know it's almost considered blasphemy. Almost. But we are talking tabletop today.
Yay!
That's what she said.
Where my Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder peeps at?
All up in here.
Marvel superheroes. Oh my God. Vampire the Masquerade. Star Wars tabletop.
You bring all that up, and it actually brings us to the main topic of today's podcast, not just tabletop, but is tabletop gaming making a comeback? Because back in like the 70s and 80s, there was just all kinds of tabletop role-playing games. You had Twilight 2000, Gangbusters, Marvel superheroes, Star Trek role-playing game, Dungeons and Dragons,
GURPS.
Obviously, GURPS. Like, you had a ton of role-playing games that kind of tapered off a little bit into the late 90s and the early 2000s, but relatively in recent years, it seems like tabletop RPGs, pen and paper RPGs are starting to make a comeback. Like, I saw a freaking Dresden Files role-playing game in a game store the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't believe it.
We were talking about Fallout before the show started. Fallout's got a tabletop.
Yeah.
They just recently
Oh yeah, I saw that. Saw the store the other day.
You know how bad I want to play that?
The real question is, does the Fallout pen and paper RPG compare to Twilight 2000?
Twilight 2000.
You might have to explain that one.
Twilight 2000 is a pen and paper RPG that was, I want to say, early 80s to late 80s. It was basically your post-apocalyptic, after World War III scenario, and it involved a very, I would say, very well-designed combat system, because it was all based on probability to hit. So when you're using guns, that actually makes a difference.
Oh wow.
See, that's
okay.
the thing. Like I think we would have to start off this podcast, this particular podcast, especially for like some of our listeners. They may not be too familiar. Like, they've heard of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, which are the two biggies right now. They may have heard of like White Wolf and Vampire the Masquerade. But let's be honest, we may have to give an explanation of really what, like a more detailed explanation of what a tabletop role-playing game is. And to be fair, Zep, I know it's your show, but I think your boy Ray might be the right one to give that explanation.
I think Ray is the perfect one to give that explanation, because I will fully admit, I am a youngin'. I was not around for the heyday of tabletop RPGs. I only have secondhand knowledge. So
I'm gonna need you to learn me too.
Ray is gonna take the wheel and give us a breakdown of tabletop RPGs, a brief history, if you will.
And just remember, Ray, there's two people here that enjoy sloppy seconds, apparently.
Well, I appreciate you.
I'm just a young Thundercat trying to learn. I'm just a young Thundercat. It's like I'm just trying to understand this wholesome game we call Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, we can go into that history.
Plus, I got a shitty D. Okay, he's not a shitty DM. He's just an asshole.
I would call Dungeons and Dragons a lot of things. Wholesome is not one of them.
Well, true. Some of the suggestive themes.
I'll give you that.
The party's tendency to usually become murder hobos.
Every time.
Oh, okay, yeah. About 99.9%.
More often than not. So, Ray, give us a little breakdown of what a tabletop RPG is.
Well, the easiest way that I found to explain it to somebody who has no prior knowledge of what a tabletop RPG is to say that it is like a play, if you will, and everybody gets around the table and they create their characters, and they're going to be the protagonist and sometimes the antagonist of the play itself. One person at the table is kind of nominated as the dungeon master or game master or storyteller, whatever RPG you happen to be playing at the time, and they're essentially acting as the narrator, and they're going to build the world up for you, set the tone, the story, and using the player input as well as throwing input out to the players to interact, they create this huge, amazing, fictitious story in which pretty much anything can happen, really.
That's a good explanation.
It is a good explanation. I would have gone with just simply paper, pencil, dice, and imagination.
Hey, too long didn't read right there.
That's the TLDR.
Yeah.
That's the TLDR right there.
But no, I've always looked at it as kind of like when you rehearse for a movie or something like that, and you do the script reads around a table. It's kind of very similar.
Right. A lot more improv.
Right. Well,
actually,
of course.
something Ray and I were talking about over Messenger the other day. Having a grid map and miniatures is actually kind of a relatively new. And when I say new, I mean within like the last decade or so. 2 decades, I guess, at this point. Development in pen and paper RPGs for tracking combat and whatnot, because in original editions of most pen and paper RPGs, it was all imagination. You had your character sheets and your dice, which of course were the numbers and determined success or failure, but you were pretty much doing it all by imagination.
It's the way I've always done it. I never understood. I get the visual aid for some people and all, but I don't know. I don't know how I feel about like having grid maps and a whole bunch of little tiny figurine avatars telling me I'm in a 10-foot room with a bunch of kobolds, and it's probably not a good idea to cast Fireball, because I don't care how big the room is. I said cast Fireball.
There we go. Murder Hobo 101, ladies and gentlemen.
But no,
how do I torch my teammates this time?
But I mean, personally, as a player, I've never no, that's a lie. I've DM'd once. As a player, I've always just preferred letting my mind immerse into the world, and I almost feel like it would take me out of it to stare at a map and little figurines.
I think there's a happy medium. Like the way my group does it, our DM only uses the grid map for combat.
Right. That's how I do it as well.
Everything else is just imagination. We're not like traversing the town using the grid map or whatever. Everything else is he describes what the area is like, what the objectives are, and we decide what our characters are going to do. And then when we get into an encounter, the grid map comes out, the figures come out, and there we go.
Right.
And that's the only time we ever used a grid map is for combat.
I will say, as a DM, using the grid maps actually that takes a lot of time and effort. Either you spend an hour or two before the session even starts drawing out all these intricate maps and stuff that your players are likely not to get to because they never follow the story, or you try and wing it and do it right there on the spot, and your players are all standing there rolling dice idly, waiting for you to get done drawing. So it's that
was the catch-22 I was literally thinking of, too. It's like, are you supposed to draw, like, 20, 30 maps and hope they get to to those particular rooms?
Right, exactly.
Our current GM has had an interesting solution to that problem. For our campaign, and it really has to do mostly with our campaign setting. We're actually playing a pirate campaign in Pathfinder right now, so most of our combat takes place on our ship, and he actually has a grid style designed for tabletop RPGs ship that he uses for placing the miniatures and everything, and it's like you can take it apart for the different levels of the ship. It's actually pretty cool. But it's an interesting solution to the problem of having to draw out a combat area. Is most of the combat is happening on the ship. You just got to place the miniatures and go.
Simple enough.
Well, see, with me, I'm not advocating that you shouldn't use maps and avatars. If that's what you do you. I'm not saying I would, leave the group or something like that if that's the way people play. Just personally, like, if I had a choice between the two, I wouldn't use them. Right. As a DM or as a player. But
that is some dedication.
But at the same time, I'm a guy that still argues the point that I don't see the problem with THACO.
Oh, so you like doing long division? Okay.
What's long division? THACO to hit armor class 0. If I need a 5 to hit an armor class of 0, and the enemy I'm facing has a armor class of -2, it means I need a 7. How hard was that?
Yeah, but you're forgetting all your modifiers, and if you've got a magical sword, and if they're wearing magical armor, there's a lot of factors that go into play here.
I get that, but at the same time, it's still, okay, I add 1, I take away 2.
Yes, citizens of the realm, you heard that right. Tabletop RPGs involve math. Ooh.
You know what? Before we go into the bad things of tabletop RPGs, and especially like the stigma that was always around things like Dungeons and Dragons, we should talk about the positives. Besides social interaction between each other, it did have a lot of positive effects, especially for like school students, with researching, with creative writing, with mathematics. I mean, most Dungeons and Dragon players I knew were better students than those that didn't play.
Very true. I can say from a lot of friends I knew in high school that they were like Blood Bowl and Dungeons and Dragons and all that kind of stuff, and
they
would do a lot more reading and research on things, going through mythology.
Don't get me wrong, I always have my phone in calculator mode right next to me during every campaign, but that's just to double check my numbers. I still run them in my head.
Right. I use a calculator on my phone, or when I was doing the Pathfinder campaign for this channel, or before then when I played 2nd edition D&D, I'd have a normal calculator, or at least a piece of paper, and I would double check myself, or I'd have little tally marks for like damage I've dealt or damage I've taken, so that way I'm not fucking up my character sheet. All the time. Yeah. But
I'm still learning.
But yeah, like
Jeez.
you, I would do it in my head. I'd roll my die, I'd see the hit, and it's like, okay, that's this, add this, add take away this. It's a 23. Yeah.
Segueing into another thing of tabletop RPGs coming back into the mainstream, we have so much tech that goes along with tabletop gaming these days. Like, you can go online and find a marketplace for frickin' dice bags, dice towers, little dishes you can roll your dice in.
Mm-hmm.
DM screens of all types.
Oh yeah.
It used to be you only had the DM screen that came with the Dungeons and Dragons box you bought back in the 1970s with the Dungeons and Dragons official art on it. And nowadays you can get all kinds of frickin' DM screens you want.
I'm laughing.
You can get custom DM screens these days.
I'm laughing. You're talking about dice bags. I remember I used to drive my grandmother nuts because I'd always steal the Crown Royal bag off her Crown Royal bottle.
No, not the Crown Royal bag.
Who are we kidding? I still take the Crown Royal bag for a dice bag.
Hey, those tags are handy. They last forever.
Right.
Can't go wrong with a nice felt.
There are vendors at my LARP that sell the Crown Royal bags as dice bags.
Well, as expensive as the freaking bottle is, with as expensive as the bottle is, they got to make their money back somehow.
Yeah.
I used to keep my juice in for my vape in the Crown Royal bag. I'd be carrying it into work, and they're like, "Don't you think it's a little early?" I'm like, "This is my vape juice." Are you over there sweating yesterday's bar trip? It smelled like old Hennessy. Okay, I'm done.
I don't know. You're bringing back some memories of a couple campaigns I wish I could forget. And trust me, I tried drinking them away. It didn't work. Okay.
Oh God, that bad, eh?
Well, speaking of tabletop, and Zephyr, this might be a good segue. Your buddy Ray here, the chronicler, we have not announced this yet. Do you think it's time we should announce it?
Are we getting a candy bar?
We're getting a candy bar.
We can give him a little taste.
Little taste. All right. Well, with Press A Gaming and with Realm of the Mist Entertainment, it's going to be in conjunction of both. We are bringing back the concept of live tabletop role playing right here on Realm of the Mist's channel with Mr. Ray, the chronicler, and I'll let him explain what he's doing and what's going to be happening.
Well, what'll, without giving too much away, because I want the listeners to come on in and check it out and, maybe get inspired to try out the game for themselves. But we're going to be doing a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons campaign based out of my own mind parts. They call that a homebrew. We won't be using any modules or anything. Original characters, original campaign, all that good stuff. And I think it'll be a good time. We got a lot of good stuff planned.
I still haven't picked my class yet. What do you guys think?
Half gay druid. What the fuck are they called? Kender.
Oh my God! You want me to play a Kender? No, that's terrible. That would be bad. I would be stealing everything.
A druid Kender who's gay.
Well, I'd like to interject a little bit here for a second, since we're talking about what class Zephyr wants to be. One of the things that has really kind of started to irritate me on the internet lately is everybody tries to relate a tabletop to a video game. And, I get that. They're looking for that connection because maybe they've never tried a tabletop before, but, maybe they're leery of it or they're unsure, so they're trying to relate it to something that's familiar. But anyway, I digress. What has really irritated me lately is they go into these tabletops and they say, "Oh, I want to play a tank." I'm sorry, but there's no such thing as a tank in Dungeons and Dragons. It doesn't work like video games. As the DM, there's no such thing as a tank. If I decide that every monster on that battlefield is going after the wizard, I guess the wizard's the tank.
Yeah, let's be fair, Zephyr. There's no such thing as a tank. It's a meat shield.
Right, right.
There's no such thing as a tank in the sense that Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder actually does have a couple of things in it that actually you can draw aggro. It's got a couple of mechanics, but as far as Dungeons and Dragons is concerned, and I'm not super well versed in 5th edition. My last romp with D&D was 4th ed.
I repeat, 2nd edition.
There really isn't any way to pull aggro, so you're right. There isn't such a thing as a tank. But other pen and paper RPGs absolutely do have the party roles as tank. It's not DPS in pen and paper. It's striker. It's called being a striker.
Right, yeah.
And then you got field controller and healer, obviously.
Well, I was going to say, in most tabletop RPGs, you got your fighter or warrior classes, which I guess kind of would constitute as your tanks because they are the ones suited best for defense and offensive melee or whatever the case may be. And then
tanks typically would actually be your clerics or your paladins. Your fighters and your warriors are going to be your strikers.
Right, but I'm saying as far as like when people don't understand the mechanics of tabletop role playing to a video game role play, like when 9 times out of 10 when they think of a tank, they think of a guy who could stand in the middle of the group and just take a beating and still fight back. That would basically be your warrior classes. Your range classes would be your ranger, your archer, your whatever the case may be, and then of course you got your magic users and your healers.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe like an orc barbarian or something.
Yeah.
It can be equated to say MMORPGs or whatnot, but there is a big difference, and that's because it's a turn-based game as opposed to a real-time combat. So, in real-time combat, your tanks and your DPS make a big difference, and in turn-based, it's more about you want to have a striker, you want to have somebody who can absorb damage, and their job is pretty much going to be getting in the way of enemy monsters or things that are going on in combat, and basically just being a big enough pain in its ass that it's forced to try and take them out.
The best way for a video game player, if you want to have kind of a Dungeons and Dragons or a tabletop role play experience in a video game, I wouldn't recommend an MMO. I sure as hell wouldn't recommend, a first-person RPG or something of that nature.
Try Fire Emblem.
I wouldn't even use Fire Emblem. I would say the original NES Final Fantasy, the first one.
You know what? Dang. Yeah, original NES Final Fantasy, because it's pretty much a direct video game adaptation of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Like that is pretty much what Final Fantasy was.
If you could deal with their initiative rolls and their hit and miss rolls and the way the creatures will decide to hit your low hit point wizard instead of your tanky warrior, then you can sit down and play tabletop. If you can't tolerate that, keep playing Elder Scrolls.
I can't believe you brought out that old gem.
It's the closest thing to like tabletop RPG I think I've ever played.
Final Fantasy is on the tip of everybody's tongues right now because they just dropped the reveal trailer for the Final Fantasy VII remake, and oh my God, is it beautiful!
Oh, it's pretty. It's pretty.
Jizz.
I'm just a little sad because they dropped the trailer and it's an updated combat system, so it's not the original turn-based that Final Fantasy VII was.
You're right, but at the same time, you know how little I give a fuck? Just give me Final... I've been, just take my money. Give me this game already. I've been hearing about it
agree.
forever. I've been waiting for this game forever. Arguably, it's probably the greatest Final Fantasy game made.
Uh-huh.
If you got,
I like 7 and 9.
I'm hoping this remake does well enough that they give us a remake of some of the other ones that were good, but not like everybody fell in love with them, because I liked Final Fantasy VIII a lot.
I knew you were going to say 8. I knew you were going to say 8.
Why are you going to say number 8 of all of them?
Dude,
Because I liked Final Fantasy VIII.
8 pissed me off so much because of what they did to Squall. Oh my god, that pissed me off so much.
That game can burn in hell.
7 pissed me off because of what they did to Aerith, so, you know.
Oh, Aerith fucking...
Oh, fuck, we're going to have to watch her die in HD. God damn it.
7 and Aerith, you know, that traumatized me in my early 20s.
Me too.
And by early 20s, I mean I was 20 years old when the game came out. But it traumatized me because you don't expect a main character to go down like that.
Nope.
I wasn't
Especially in games back then.
Oh, yeah.
Like, early 90s.
Right.
Main characters didn't die.
But I'll tell
Plot armor was in full swing.
But I'll tell you what, 8 pissed me off so bad because you got involved in Squall and his story and how he doesn't want to get connected to other people because he's afraid if he gets to know people and then he gets separated from those people and he's going to die alone. You get it, you understand. But then they work and they break down his barrier and he becomes part of the team and he loves his people. And then at the end of the game, he winds up in an alternate dimension and dies alone. Fuck you, Final Fantasy VIII.
That's why I like 9 better than 8.
That's why you play Final Fantasy VIII and you just never finish the game.
You just let it fade away. It's a memory that never
Squall
happened.
gets his happy ending. He can't die. He can't die alone in another dimension if you never defeat the final boss.
Oh shit! But no, that you know, getting back on topic here. That's what I would recommend for players that want to try tabletop but want to see something equivalent in a video game. I would say you can get an emulator for free and play the original, not the remakes that were on the PlayStation or on the Game Boys or anything like that. The original Final Fantasy for NES.
Basically, we got to go back in the day.
Yeah.
Blow the dust off. I remember that game.
Ooh, yeah.
Oh my god, I feel old now.
Get some white mage, black mage on.
Or if you really want to have a taste of it, do Dragon Warrior 1, where you had to use a menu command to walk downstairs.
Oh, hell to the no. We ain't going that old.
If you're going to go that far, you might as well just have him play Zork.
Hey,
or the ET game.
Do MUDs still exist?
No.
The online text-based RPGs?
Yeah, those still exist.
Play those.
Oh my gosh, they still exist.
They've got a whole internet archive of them. I'll have to find it one of these days, but they've got a website that's got the text-based RPGs for like just about everything. Zork, MUDs. I'm trying to remember other one of them. Professor Quandary.
Man, I remember getting into a LAN for a MUD, and you'd had to wait in line for somebody to fucking log out to get just thrown into a fucking already started party game.
Is that when we had the 256?
Basically, yeah.
Jeez Louise. You taking this back to some dark times, bro.
For all you youngins and much younger than me in the audience, this is back in a time when, in order to connect to the internet, you had to put your phone on a receiver.
Oh, that pissed you off even more. Like back in the day with the data fax modems and shit. And you're sitting there, you finally get into a LAN, you're playing, you're getting into the story, and then all of a sudden the screen just freezes because your sister decided to make a phone call.
Good times. Good times.
Oh,
And then we got dial-up, which wasn't much better.
No. You got mail.
oh, dial up. Let's blow off the dust. You got mail.
You did that way too well.
That's because I've heard it a lot.
Do I have?
You gotta do what you gotta do for $9.95 a month.
Net zero. Oh my god.
Right?
So anyway, I'm really trying to get Ray involved in this. He's got to discuss some more.
Hi, Ray.
So I already know what kind of character I'm playing in the campaign. Yes, I will be one of the players in Ray's campaign. Which do you want to reveal the name of the show?
We can absolutely do that. I already put that out on my Instagram. Actually, I was so excited for it.
Oh, nice.
But the name of our show will be the Chronicles of the Lost Realm. It's kind of a little.
Tying in that branding there, I see.
Yeah, gotta get my name out there. No. But, it's kind of a foreshadowing of things to come, really.
Really? So you base the story that you're going to be putting us through on the title?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a collaborated effort to come up with that title, and I thought, why not incorporate it right into the story?
That's nice.
Nice.
Myself as a DM, I've been DMing since '96, and I know that's not super long in most people's books, but from a storytelling DMing point, that's a while. But one thing I learned over the course of all this time is you get from the game what you put into it, and the biggest influencer of the game is the players. Now, when I first started, it was kind of the end of. I was playing the end of first edition, getting into second edition, and the times were changing. And at that period in time, Gary Gygax, the originator of Dungeons and Dragons, he had this mindset that it was the DM versus the player. It was the DM's job to try and kill the player. It was the player's job to try and survive, kind of like a normal game you would play at the table with, a board game.
Right.
There's got to be a winner. There's got to be a loser. Like, that's how they had it. But, the advent of second edition, they started changing that a little bit to where, it's more about the tale. It's more about getting the players involved. So throughout the years, I've learned to really listen to my players. So I've adopted this DMing playing style of, I'm going to throw something out there at the very beginning. I'm going to set the world for you, and then I'm going to respond to what you do, not the other way around.
That was something that always appealed to me, to particularly Dungeons and Dragons, because I don't have a whole lot of experience in other role-playing games. I played a little bit of GURPS. I played a little bit of Cyberpunk. Played a little bit of Vampire the Masquerade. Mostly Dungeons and Dragons. I've had my one experience, which you guys know, with Pathfinder, and one homemade role-playing game that a buddy of mine in high school created that I actually named, called Metal Fantasy, which
nice.
He completely ripped off the character sheet from Marvel superheroes. But I mean, it was a fun game.
I can't really judge that too much because I plan on taking the Marvel Superheroes RPG and building a My Hero Academia campaign based off of it.
Nice.
Are you serious?
Oh, hella serious. Pretty much all you got to do is take the Marvel Superheroes campaign and change all references of superpowers to quirk, and you're good.
Yeah.
But the whole phase rip and everything else was stolen from that. But I mean, what appealed to me was, like, unlike with a video game where you have a clear defined beginning, middle, and end, you're going for that last boss fight, and the game over. With tabletop RPGs, particularly Dungeons and Dragons, the goal is to get your character to retirement.
The goal is
Right.
the goal is character growth.
It's character growth,
Right.
but it's to the point where you don't want you to see your character die. You want to see your character go off into the sunset, fade off into his golden years, because he made it through his life. The point of Dungeons and Dragons is to live.
Yeah, I'm actually struggling with that with our Pathfinder Pathfinder campaign right now. My character is, for all intents and purposes, dead right now. He somehow managed to get his soul stuck in his soul gem, so he's dead. It's reversible, but he's, for all intents and purposes, dead.
Right.
Yeah,
You know,
that's depressing.
And I always thought that was more appealing, because it was about the story and the journey. And once the journey ends, it may not end in a blaze of glory facing down a god dragon. It may be you've saved a fucking farmer's goat from falling off a cliff, and that's your final adventure.
Mm-hmm.
It is and that appealed to me. It appealed to me that, like, it wasn't going to be the exact same experience every time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Going back to like how Dungeons and Dragons was in the beginning, because Ray brought up Gary Gygax and the DM versus player. There are some brutal modules from back then.
Oh yeah.
Like, absolutely terrible. Like, they're not designed for you to survive. It is a test of how long can you survive, how far can you make it in the campaign. Tomb of Horrors comes to mind.
Which coincidentally is probably my favorite dungeon to put people through. I quite enjoy doing that.
Will you be pulling references from these modules through Chronicles?
I was actually thinking at some point of using the Tomb of Horrors, but calling it something different. Just not to kill the characters off or anything like that, but just to, see what you can do with it. It was always labeled as the thinking man's dungeon. It's easy to survive as long as you are not impulsive.
God, you just brought up a memory of a character.
As long as you don't go full murder hobo, you're good.
Exactly.
No, you're bringing up a memory of a character in a campaign. Not that I played, a buddy of mine played, and he used to annoy my DM to no end because he played a narcissistic cavalier. Like the type of guy that if he's in a deep dark dungeon and he smiled, the room would light up. Like that narcissistic. And he was annoying my DM one particular day, and my DM turned around and exposed us to a room full of mirrors, to which the Cavalier absolutely fell in love with it. Like automatically running to it to check himself out, how clean his armor is, how bright his smile is. And it turned him to stone, and he was left that way.
Oh, nice.
So there's a statue of a Cavalier, thumb on his chin, smiling at himself, staring at a mirror, still to this day in that dungeon.
Oh man. One of my more favorite diabolical traps.
And I spelled trap, THIS.
Oh god.
One of my more favored diabolical traps is just a very simple, like a slide trap, just randomly placed, but at the end of said slide is a gelatinous cube waiting to break the player's falls. Gelatinous cubes, for those unexperienced with it, are basically large cubes of a jello-like gelatinous material, but it is sentient and it dissolves whatever lands into it, absorbing its nutrients. So yeah, you can try and struggle your way out, but it's known to be kind of difficult.
It's a Bill Cosby Jello square.
Oh.
Jeez Louise. You did not bring the cars into this conversation.
Funny, but wrong.
Too soon.
No, getting the pudding pop.
Hello, it's the pudding. The pudding.
Oh.
You put in the pudding into the jello, and that is what you get. Go.
Oh, God.
But
Okay, I'm done.
I do have one an additional little tidbit to put out here for anybody who might be listening that's on the fence about trying this out. Any tabletop. This isn't just exclusive to Dungeons and Dragons. It's just what I happen to know the most about.
So many types of tabletop. Like,
right.
Pick a genre. There's tabletop of it. Like that is part of what I was getting with the topic of it coming back into style. Like, holy shit! Pick a genre. There's a tabletop for it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But recently on Reddit, one of the Redditors, Mr. Builder, coined a term called the Matt Mercer effect. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with who Matt Mercer is, but he's a voice actor, pretty predominant. He did some DMing for Vin Diesel and some other celebrities. But basically, the paraphrasing of what Mr. Builder was getting at is he had this Dungeons and Dragons game. He had some new players coming in, and they had been watching, 30 plus episodes of Critical Role, which is Matt Mercer's video of them playing the game. And so when these players came in, they had this expectation. Right.
I love grog.
They
You
had
do not see grog.
They had this expectation of what the game was going to be, and obviously their DM was not Matt Mercer, and they certainly weren't Vox Machina, so it wasn't what they expected. So when you're trying out a game like this, any game tabletop wise, and you're getting into it for the first time, everybody's going to be a little nervous. Your voice is going to be shaky. You might be embarrassed. Even, I find myself a lot as a DM. These are my close friends. I've ran numerous games for them, but whenever I start a new campaign, I always get kind of nervous right at the beginning. I'm not sure how it's all going to turn out. I don't know if I'm going to do a good job, and I'm no voice actor, even though I'm trying. But I'm going to give it my all, and if you give it your all, I think we're going to have a good time.
See,
My
first
ever character for D&D ever was known as Canis the Nosebleed Ninja. I rolled a rogue. And obviously, that involves pouring a bunch of your points into stealth and relying off of sneak attacks and all that stuff. The only problem is, in my rolling, I got some pretty bad stats that I had to assign somewhere. And I mistakenly chose Constitution as a dump stat. And so, my rogue character, I call Ninja because he was all based on stealth and everything, but it's alliteration with nosebleed, wound up with two hit points to start out with.
That's
So the joke was he got a nosebleed, would die. Hence,
I believe it.
Hence Canis the Nosebleed Ninja. It's a wonder he survived that campaign.
My first character was a Drow Ranger.
Gosh.
Named Nim Take which you guys will get familiar with Nim in Chronicles. It'll happen, but Nim, I remember his first ever thing. I knew my DM knew he had a monster on his hands, and so did I, and it's my first experience. But being a Drow in the Forgotten Realms world, obviously being on the surface, people didn't like me, and I walked into a tavern. And I'm wearing a sash of an assassin's group that are rogues that the world knows over in Waterdeep, but they still don't like us because we're Drow. And I'm trying to get a glass of meat or whatever, and two drunk idiots come over and try to pick a fight with me. So me being a chaotic good ranger, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to kill these guys, but I want to get them away from me. So I called shot. I was like, I will take my two scimitars. I will use the blunt ends to go behind their legs and trip them. I rolled 2 natural 20s.
Beautiful.
Wow.
They both fell down and broke their necks.
You lucky son of a gun. I can't even roll like that, man.
Oh shit!
Every time I roll, I end up getting punched or something.
There was a campaign I was playing with a couple of friends a number of years ago that we ended up getting into a bar brawl, and my hybrid fighter ranger went to go break it up and rolled a critical hit on. He went to go grab the stool or knock the bar stool out of the one guy's hand because he was waving it and trying to hit people with it. Rolled a natural 20 on it and basically punched it and disintegrated the bar stool into sawdust. Needless to say, the entire barroom brawl came to a screeching halt.
For those who ever listened to the Gaming XP episodes that we were doing here on Realm of the Mist, you know I was playing Nim's son, Farhan. And we were in one of the first fights, and to this day, it's still probably one of my most favorite moments that I've ever had playing Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder tabletop role-playing, is I called for a double stab, because I was carrying two long swords, or two short swords, rather. And I called for a double stab, and I rolled high, so I was able to, insert and lift him up. I forget what it was. I think it was an orc we were fighting. And by my next turn, I'm standing there holding this dead body up with two swords, and I look over at another orc. And I turn around, and I fling the dead orc off of my swords into the other orc, rolled a natural 20, and killed the other orc with an orc. So I beat a motherfucker with a motherfucker.
You, sir, are legendary.
Isn't that phrase just the entire plot of Soul Eater?
Pretty much.
I'm gonna beat this motherfucker with this motherfucker.
Pretty much.
So that
and Maka, just throw me around and see what happens.
I tried to do it again with a war priestess character that we had running with us. I tried to throw the orc to the war priestess to hit with this god hammer that she had. That didn't work. It would have been cool because I was thinking baseball, I'm pitching to her, but it didn't work. But yeah, I mean, as far as anybody, my personal advice in this day, especially in this day and age, with the way Zephyr described, there's a lot of technology out there that you could use for tabletop RPG. Like Ray had described, you could find things like Critical Role or Dice Camera Action on YouTube and check out how people play. But you could also go to places like Roll20.com, and you could get involved in online tabletop RPGs. You could create a character, jump into new player. I want to say worlds, for lack of a better term, and get the experience before you finally sit down at a table with a group and try this out for yourself. And I think that would be the smarter way to learn it. There
is a program on Steam called Fantasy Grounds that has several different levels of licenses for it, all varying prices, to include a free option. And obviously free is the most limited if you can join in to somebody who has a license if they invite you. But if you get a master license for Fantasy Grounds, you can have people who don't even have Fantasy Grounds at all can join into your campaign. And it's a complete suite that you can have the grid map on the computer. It's even got, you can roll virtual dice on the program. It's basically a one-stop shop for online pen and paper RPGs.
That's not a terrible idea. And of course, this day and age, the big thing I've noticed with Dungeons and Dragons books, because I've looked at them, especially knowing that if I ever want to play again, I got to get the newer editions and shit like that. The prices are outrageous. I know they're outrageous. $60 for a player's manual, $70 for the Dungeon Master Guide, But you can find these things online.
Online PDFs.
You can find online PDFs.
You are a pirate.
You are taking money from these poor developers' mouths.
Well,
Hey,
if they would go back to the $14.99 like when I was playing second edition D&D, I'd be fine with it. But $60 for a 100-page book, fuck you.
Well,
Yeah, but
this time, in this day and age, with the popularity and everything, they just trying to get their hustle on.
I wouldn't pay $100 for War and Peace, and there's a lot of pages in that book.
Now, don't get me wrong. I definitely contribute.
That's the RPG, Bob.
And buy the books and buy other official. I don't want to call it merchandise, but I guess official merchandise for these different RPGs and the different companies that make them. And always support the creators. Always. Like, come on, guys. Always support the creators. But there are places to find this information online that you don't have to pay through the nose to get. And, honestly, sometimes I prefer to buy the physical books, just because I like going to my physical game stores. To kind of jump off what Chris was saying earlier about there's places online to find it and jump in with other people and play. Find your local game stores. I guarantee you there are people who are like trying to set up game groups with people to play with.
There's certain comic shops too. Like I'll name one here in Pennsylvania. If you're in the eastern Pennsylvania area, go up to near the Willow Grove Park Mall. There's a little comic shop called Brave New World, and they do tabletop RPGs. I think on Friday nights. And then down in Jenkintown, there's Seventh Dimension, and they're always doing tabletop RPGs and Magic the Gathering tournaments and stuff. There's places you can go.
Oh yeah, in Independence, there's a place called Game Cafe, and it's pretty nice. They even got an arcade in there too, old school games and stuff.
In Buffalo and Niagara Falls area, I'm gonna give a shout out to Dragon Snack Games and Iron Buffalo.
Iron Buffalo. That sounds kind of tough.
Sounds like a microbrewery.
Oh man.
Sounds like a
what? A good
name.
microbrew sounds good right now. I'm not gonna lie.
Iron Buffalo is kind of awesome because they did this event a while ago of back when Infinity War came out.
Right.
They did an entire marathon of every Marvel film up until that point.
Good God. I bet the staff was saying, "Can I go home, please?"
No, the owner's the one who decided to do it.
I said the staff. I didn't say the owner. I said the staff. The one making $7.15 an hour part time normally. That's on their 20th hour.
Jeez Louise.
I don't know. I'd enjoy getting to watch Marvel movies all day at work. That'd be fun.
That's true.
And it's not like it's playing the same movie over and over and over again. It's each movie in the series going forward.
That's a lot of movies.
Granted, there weren't as many as before Endgame, which holy crap, that would have been. Oh man.
22 films.
22 films. But you could skip the Incredible Hulk probably.
Okay, first of all, yes.
It's just confusing because it's not Mark Ruffalo.
It's confusing because it's not a good movie.
Okay, so do we got to bring back Lou Ferrigno?
Yes.
They did.
I mean, he's still buff.
Lou Ferrigno had a cameo in the Incredible Hulk movie. It was with the Stan Lee cameo.
Yep.
There were the two security guards. One of them was Stan Lee, and Stan Lee was explaining the job to the other guy. That was Lou Ferrigno.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody fucking missed it.
But,
I missed it.
I still wholeheartedly believe that the cameo appearances should still continue, but it should be Deadpool.
Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds would do it. You know he would do it.
That would be funny.
He's the only character that would make sense. Although I still say it's a missed opportunity that Stan Lee was not, that one of those cameos wasn't him in the Avengers headquarters. And, he's a janitor. and he's coming in cleaning the room, and he sees Mjolnir sitting on a table, and he lifts Mjolnir up like it's nothing to dust underneath it, sets it back down, looks at the camera, and winks. That's what we needed, and we nenever got it. It's a missed opportunity.
That would have been great.
Maybe they did the Walt Disney and cryogenically froze him or something. Right next to Walt Disney or something.
I just had
the man deserves his rest.
I just had the non sequitur scene from Family Guy about Walt Disney come up where they defrosted Walt Disney, and he sits up and he goes, "Are the Jews gone yet?" "No, the Jews aren't gone yet.
God.
Put me back under."
Walt Disney. Racist son of a bitch.
But no, that would be my recommendation. Again, getting back on point. I mean, Ray, you're a DM. You tell me if I'm wrong here. You know, there's plenty of avenues and outlets, whether you go to your local store, you go to these places like Roll20, and you find out for yourself and get some experience before you sit down, you know, and find out if this is something you want to do before you sit down at a table. Because personally, one thing that always frustrated me as a player, and I got to imagine it's even worse for a DM, is you spend all that time and energy getting a character together, getting a backstory together, getting them integrated into the story, getting them integrated into the group, and then they just bail on you.
Oh, that is the number one problem of tabletop RPGs, and we've covered the positive. We have. I guarantee you, we have sold a couple of people on tabletop RPGs at this point. Now we're going to cover one of the negatives. It is so hard to get a regular group going together because nobody can make a schedule line up.
I absolutely agree with that one.
But anyway, to bring it back around to the original point of topic and try to wrap it up and everything, tabletop RPGs are definitely making a comeback these days. We've got more genres than ever of tabletop RPGs to play around with. You want your high fantasy, you got Dungeons & Dragons, Pathfinder, GURPS, Fate, the Fate system, which you can pretty much design whatever genre you want. You've got, if you want your sci-fi fare, you got the Star Wars role-playing game. You got the Star Trek role-playing game. One I actually want to pull out and try soon is Starfinder. They basically took Pathfinder and turned it into space. It's Pathfinder in space.
It's a really good system. I really like where they went with that.
So I want to try and give Starfinder a find. If you're a horror fan, you've got horror tabletop RPGs you can play around with. There's stuff like Trail of Cthulhu. I guess Vampire the Masquerade technically counts as horror.
There's even sports.
Depending on how they play it.
Yeah, they've even got sports RPGs.
There are.
You could have a team of all humans, all orcs, all ninjas, and shit like that.
It gives a whole new meaning to fantasy football.
It really does. I'm just picturing a team of orcs playing curling.
I don't even want to picture that. I would laugh too hard.
I was imagining a team of orcs against a team of Kender.
That can be a thing. You can have a whole bunch of elves versus orcs.
You know what was just running through my head with that iteration? You remember the old Nintendo game Ice Hockey? Where you had the fat player, the normal player, and the skinny player, and the fight would happen, and the skinny guy would constantly get thrown out of the group?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what went through my head. You talking about, like, orcs versus Kender.
Hell to the no.
I would definitely have to agree, kind of driving the point home about, the popularity of tabletops coming back. I mean, I know they kind of focused on D&D because that's just what everybody knows. But back when, we were younglings, we had to deal with, social ostracization. Like, no, if you played those games, you were a straight up nerd. Like you were a social outcast. But now you got, shows like Futurama and Big Bang Theory, Stranger Things. They're all like dropping dimes on D&D, and now people are like, "Oh, my favorite celebrity is playing D&D. Oh, it must be cool now. All right, I'm gonna give it a try."
Well, I blame Will Wheaton for bringing it into the mainstream.
Well, you got to get. It's also the fact that, like Ray said, that the culture had changed when we were kids. When most of us were kids, it wasn't cool to be a nerd. Mm-hmm. It wasn't cool that you collected comic books or played Magic or ran your own clan in a video game or something of that nature. It wasn't. Right. It wasn't cool. It wasn't cool that you could name all the members of Avengers since the 1960s. Nowadays, it's celebrated. Nerd culture is the cool culture,
right?
But back when I was a teenager, I used to tell my buddies I was going out with my girlfriend just to go fucking get up with my D&D group on a Friday night, just so they wouldn't know I was a nerd.
Yeah.
And now you don't have to hide it anymore.
No, yeah.
Right. Speaking of Will Wheaton, if anybody ever wants to actually, if you saw him in Big Bang Theory and you thought, oh, that seemed kind of cool, whatever. If you ever really want to hear Will Wheaton actually play D&D, check out Acquisitions Inc. That was quite hilarious for the first season that he was there. He played a really good character that I believe is going to be very likened to your character, Chris, with Chronicles that's coming up.
Ah, nice.
You know what? I'm thinking sorcerer.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking I'm gonna do a sorcerer.
Oh, Jesus
because
Christ.
I enjoy rolling fistfuls of dice, and I enjoy the idea of all of my spells rolling off charisma.
Yeah, 5th edition really did some positive things. Obviously, dexterity, being how nimble your character is, for those that don't know, is still the super stat. It, pretty much everything can be tied into dexterity somehow or another.
Work for my mom.
But the secondary one, I would have to say, is charisma. I mean, you could be a completely combat-less character with a high enough charisma. You could talk your way through the entire game.
Oh yeah,
Jedi mind trick and shit.
That's why everybody enjoys playing bards so much.
Oh yeah,
fucking hate bards.
Seduce everything.
Fucking hate bards.
I said slay the dragon, not lay the dragon.
You know what? That's a good idea. That means we can put that in the party. It's like, hey baby, I need you to go in on.
I'll play a bard just to piss off Chris.
Don't think I won't role play it too.
Man, Chris gonna kill us all. We all play together.
My instrument is a harmonica.
oh lordy.
All I'm thinking is
Blues Traveler.
All I'm thinking with a bard right now. All I'm thinking is Dice Camera Action. Nate's character. If you guys watch Dice Camera Action, like his character's funny, but God, he annoys the piss out of me. I fucking hate bards.
Well, I think we have my character.
So yeah, if anybody wants to tune in for some laughs, definitely check out Chronicles of Lost Realms. Sounds like it's going to be a chaos fest.
Well, we definitely know for this upcoming, Ray is obviously going to be DMing. This is his show, and as you could tell, myself and Zephyr will be part of the show. Zephyr, Zep, as I call you, Zep. So there's still room at the table, so to speak. So not only people that are part of the Realm of the Mist community, but people listening to this. If you are a role player and want to get involved in this, we have room. Send us a message. Give us a comment down below. Let us know.
Absolutely. The more the merrier.
I would love fan involvement. Are you kidding me? Oh!
I promise I won't kill anybody in the first session.
I don't make that promise. Especially
You're gonna kill somebody in the first session.
If there's a bard, I'm making it happen.
Don't be a team killing fucktard, Chris.
It's a legitimate strategy.
let's
There's nothing
not be
legitimate about
chaotic
murdering
stupid.
all of us.
Chaotic stupid. Can that be my alignment?
Chaotic stupid. I'm pretty sure
Murder
chaotic.
is wrong.
I'm pretty sure chaotic stupid is going to be the alignment across the board for our party.
You know, I'd like to throw a little something out there about that, actually. Like, so everybody seems to, you know, be into this impression because of the old school ways of things. You know, your alignment is a very loose guideline, I'll say, of how your character generally acts. And chaotic means exactly what that word means. You don't particularly like laws or rules. You want to do your own thing. And then the other half of your alignment is either good, neutral, or evil. So obviously chaotic evil is the worst of the worst, and lawful good is the best of the best, as, you know, that's how it was thought. But if you ever take the time to read in the book and you look at true neutral, the first line in the description of true neutral is, you do what you feel is right at the time. I feel like that gives you so many more liberties.
But I mean, the alignment does tie into the character class you decide to play. Like, you can't be a true neutral druid. Well, I'm sure you can, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Right,
like,
it'd be difficult, yeah.
Very difficult.
There are restrictions to certain classes that if you want to play, you kind of have to choose particular alignments because it doesn't mesh. You can't be a cleric of a good god and be chaotic evil.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
You really can't be a chaotic evil paladin either, because paladins are almost always lawful, even if they're an anti-paladin.
Right.
Right.
They're almost
How about
always
a neutral
lawful.
good monk?
Neutral good monk is generally okay. Monks have a wide alignment spread. There are there are certain classes that have a narrower alignment spread than others.
Yeah, I always did the monk as, you know, whatever your backstory of your temple would be. You know, there's evil temples out there. We see them in movies all the time. There's good temples out there, so it's, you know, whatever.
Okay, how about Moroku from Inuyasha?
Oh, that's a tough one.
I'm almost getting the impression that Anthony wants to join in.
Could be a thing. Anthony might be able to join us.
All right.
I'm still learning, though. I'm not gonna lie, man. So don't get frustrated with me.
Well, as it was mainly pointed out, Zep isn't very well versed in 5th edition. I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons since 2nd edition, so I think it's going to be a learning curve for pretty much all of us.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
But you know,
You know
and
what?
this is
I'd
kind
be
of one of
open to
those downsides. If it's actually a double-edged sword, with the popularity of tabletop gaming coming to the forefront and people really getting into it more and more, you know, they had to change a lot of stuff. You know, we brought up at the beginning show the THACO thing and how to do math and things like that, and they kind of wanted to simplify and streamline things. So I promise you, with 5th edition, it's very easy to grasp and learn. They really moved the rules down to the easy end of the spectrum. I mean, my 8-year-old son has a character. It's not a hard concept to grasp.
Well, there's also one golden rule in most tabletops. In fact, Gary Gygax himself has put it in many Dungeons & Dragons books, is that the rule books themselves are guidelines, and at the end of the day, the DM and the campaign trump all.
Right.
So like with Chronicles of the Lost Realm, it's a homebrew campaign, which means there could be rules that, for people sitting there listening, they're sitting there thumping their Dungeon Master guidebook like, no, that's not correct.
Yeah. We should probably put that as a disclaimer in there that, we're just playing fast and loose with these rules.
Right, It's whatever the story and campaign demands.
I'm what they call a very rule of cool. I'm going to let you get away with a lot as long as it is cool.
So
noted.
So beating a motherfucker with another motherfucker, does that fall under rule of cool?
All right, so
yes.
Talking on that,
the bard loves to hear. Rule of cool.
talking on beating a motherfucker with another motherfucker. I was actually running a Star Wars Saga Edition tabletop RPG when I was in Las Vegas, and it was with a whole group of people that they had seen the movies, but they weren't really into the lore or RPGs in general. But there was one particular player that was playing a Jedi, and she wanted to be more focused on Force use and, less on the lightsaber aspect. And she actually used, I forget what the power is actually called in Saga Edition, but she used the Force to lift a creature because they could not seem to shoot it at low levels with their laser guns. So she used the Force to lift the creature and beat its friend with it.
Nice.
And I just had to go with it. It was too good to not do, So
You want to buy some death sticks?
There's a bard for you.
Alrighty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's about time to wrap it up. So,
Absolutely.
Chris, where can they find you?
You can find me anywhere you find Realm of the Mist Entertainment, right here on YouTube. Make sure you check out the website down below in the description. Hit that link to be able to go check out all the great shows from Realm of the Mist Entertainment and Press A Gaming's podcast, not just podcasts, but video game services. And, of course, you can find us on Anchor.fm. Give us a support, or wherever quality podcasts are heard.
And, Ray, where can they find you?
I'm going to be doing the Chronicles of the Lost Realm here very shortly. We don't have an actual hard date yet, but keep an eye out for it. It's going to be a good time.
And Anthony, where can they find you?
Okay, my name is Anthony Anthem, a.k.a. Mr. A.k.a. You can find me on Delivery Bros 816 on Twitter and Instagram. Anthony Anthem Williams on Facebook and on Instagram. And check out the podcast Delivery Bros on all major platforms.
And last but not least, I am your host, Zephyr Zero, and you can find me on Realm of the Mist on Press A Gaming Podcast. You can also find me on Twitter at Zephyr Zero. And you can also find me on Facebook at Keith Zephyr Partlow. And, wow, brain completely lost me there.
Whoa, long train, short track.
Yeah.
So are you okay over there? You gonna make it?
It was like Final Fantasy Fantasy 9 suplexing the train. Right there.
That's all right. Chris can fix it in post.
Anyway.
Why would I do that? Remember the rule of cool?
Yeah. Rule of cool.
Oh my gosh.
This is the Press A Gaming Podcast, and remember to press A for more great gaming content in 2 weeks.
There you go, guys. We'll catch you soon.
Bye, guys.
Why didn't the Three Little Pigs go in for some kind of flat share scheme?
Does Jesus get to choose which wine he turns it into?
Why don't Sims have the upper body strength to climb out of a swimming pool?
And does everybody really want to be a cat?
I'm Will Baker.
And I'm Alex Prescott.
And if you're the type of person that overthinks these deep philosophical questions, then Think to the Brink is the podcast for you.
From Disney characters to song lyrics, debates to social etiquette, tune in every week for your dose of paralysis by analysis.
All topic suggestions are welcome. If you can think it, we can overthink it. Think to the Brink. Available on all podcast platforms.
Hey everyone, this is John Ollie, inviting you to check out War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. Each week, me and my co-host Christopher Stolle discuss the news and theories surrounding one of the largest movie franchises in the world. So join us every Wednesday as we travel to the galaxy far, far away here on Anchor FM and wherever fine podcasts are heard.
You know, when you need CBD, vape, juice, or a new mod, go to Scorpion. 10859 Boston Avenue, Philadelphia, PA 19116. They are formerly known as East Coast Vapor. They have all your needs, all the equipment, all the juice. And hey, while you're there, sit down, enjoy a beer, and just hang out with a bunch of cool people. If you really need your next vape machine, or maybe you just want to try a locally made juice, make sure you hit up Vape Scorpion. That's 1085 Boston Avenue, Philadelphia, PA 19116. Or give a call to 215-464-8273. Oh yeah, and make sure you let them know that Realm of the Mist Entertainment sent you.
He said, she's sure you say that. That's offensive. Well, someone's gotta say it. It had to be said with Venus. Catch the live show Tuesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Check out the recordings at any time. Guest check. Listener, beware. Mature content, sexual content, trigger warning. Do you dare say?
Hi, my name's Chris. I'm here about Realm of the Mist podcast. In this podcast, we talk about all the great entertainment things, from movies, music, books, comic books, and many other forms of entertainment, as well as politics, current events, and just general humor and having a good time. If you're looking for a podcast that is right up your alley, look no further than Realm of the Mist podcast, here on Anchor.fm, or where fine podcasts can be heard.
Hi, this is Dave from the Comic Collection at 83 Bustleton Pike in Feasterville, Pennsylvania. Our phone number is 215-357-3332. We are right next to Northeast Philadelphia. We have action figures, gaming, statues, albums, and CDs, graphic novels, other knickknacks, and, of course, comics. Established in 1985, we are your go-to store. Come by and say hello, and say that the guys from Radiocast FM Radio sent you. The address again is 83 Bustleton Pike, Feasterville, Pennsylvania, or call 215-357-3332.
Three-eyed turtle? Is that alright?
What the fuck is a three-eyed turtle?
Are you tired of the same old podcast with no humor? Well, join us for After Hours, where everything is funny, at least to us, on Anchor.fm, and where quality podcasts are heard.
How the fuck did we get on this?
I don't know.
FCC started this shit. It's their fucking fault.
Hey everyone, this is Zach.
This is Liam.
And this is White People Shit.
We are a bi-weekly podcast.
Whoa. Maybe you're bi-week. I'm straight and strong.
It means twice a week, you douche.
Oh. Yeah, listen to us twice a week. On White People Wednesdays, talk about gay stuff, zombies, superhero sex positions.
And on Featured Peep Fridays, we interview the Featured Peep of the Week.
Yeah, like a fucking furry.
Just search WPS Podcast and look for the white dude in red pajamas.
We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and where else get your podcasts.
We believe in equal opportunity humor, where all things can be made fun of. So if your feelings get hurt and you're offended, you can always
eat a dick.